We began the season of Lent just a few days ago on Ash Wednesday. And during Lent, we're asked to do three main things. We're called to fast. So we give up things that we like, food, perhaps playing games, perhaps screen time. So we give up things. We're called to fast so that we have a little bit more time in our life to pray and then to do acts of service. I want us to think a little bit about fasting, first of all. I sometimes go to the supermarket because I'm a regular person, like all of us. Food just doesn't appear. I've got to go to the supermarket, like all of us do. And I've noticed at the checkout at the supermarket, and parents are probably aware of this as well, that sometimes there are all these additional things that can find their way into the shopping trolley when you get just close to the checkout. Because there are all these things to tempt you just as you get to the checkout. There are the chocolate bars. There are the cans of drink. There are all these things. It's almost like the supermarket knows just to get you when you get to the checkout. My niece, who's 9 years old, occasionally when she stays with my grandparents, doesn't like going to the supermarket with my mother, her grandmother, because my mum notices when additional things get put into the shopping basket. Some mums, I'm sure, know what I'm talking about. But my niece loves going with my dad to the supermarket because my dad doesn't really pay attention. If an extra chocolate bar or something else finds its way into the shopping basket, well, he'll just pay the bill at the end. And I'm sure there are some people who just do this as well. I remember a few years ago being at the supermarket and I noticed my niece put something in and my mum was there. And my mum said, "No, we're not getting this Kit Kat or whatever it was." And she wasn't very happy. She had a bit of a tantrum. I'm sure some of the kids around the church know what a tantrum is. Some of you might have even had them before. Well, you don't get your way and you start to yell and scream in a public place. It can be an effective way to try to get your way. And that's what perhaps is being tempted by Jesus in the gospel. Jesus in the gospel is being told, you're a bit hungry, well, why don't you manipulate the situation so you get what you want? And that's a temptation for all of us. When we don't get what we want, sometimes we can stamp our feet and force people to give us what we want. But that's not the way of Jesus. The way of Jesus says that when we're tempted to perhaps have a tantrum or force someone to give us what we want, we're asked, the way to overcome this is we're asked to fast, to give up some of the good things that we want. We give up chocolate. We might give up ice cream. We might give up access to our tablet for a period of time because these things shouldn't control us. And we shouldn't be controlling mum or dad or our uncle or our grandfather or whatever it is by creating a scene so we get what we want. Because Jesus wants us to be the best we can be. And so during this time of the year, we're asked to give up things. We fast a little bit. We give up things that we like so that we can be more joyful in our relationships with others. Another thing that can sometimes be a temptation, and the gospel talks about this as well, is that sometimes we can say, I can't see God, and so I don't really think God exists. And so sometimes people think, oh, well, they'll make themselves God. God is the one who preserves life and sometimes has the power over life. And sometimes people make themselves into God or make themselves the centre of the world. Sometimes kids can do this, but sometimes adults can do this as well, where life becomes about myself and not about others. And the first thing we're asked to do when perhaps we become so focused on, I want this, I want that, Jesus says we should pray. Because when we pray, we're entering into a relationship with Jesus and with others, which is a great thing. So 2 things we're meant to do during Lent to help us grow closer to Jesus. One is to give up some of the good things that we like, chocolate, screen time, etc. And we're called to then pray. Spend some time talking to Jesus. Maybe take up some time at home as a family to maybe say grace at meal, at dinner time. That's a great thing to do, to just give thanks. Or maybe to say a little prayer at bedtime for those who are suffering in our world. Maybe pray for those in the Ukraine at this time, or maybe those in the floods, or maybe those who have died recently. Good thing to pray. The third thing that sometimes can be a temptation, and this happens in the gospel with Jesus, is that we want to have power and control over everybody. And the way to overcome this is to become people of service. And so during Lent, we take up acts of service, acts of charity for others. We do something nice without being asked. And that's a great thing for all of us. Even the young children here in our church, you can do good things at home. One thing I know that my mum wants her grandchildren to do is to maybe pack up the plates on the table and take them to the sink. That's a start, to say we're part of a family, we're contributing, as opposed to expecting everybody else to do everything for you. And so we can take up acts of service. As adults, sometimes we do that by assisting with Caritas, which is the Project Compassion project that happens during Lent to help with communities around the world. And Caritas this year has a number of projects. Details are about it in the bulletin. And there are little envelopes and money boxes that we use to assist. There is a temptation in life, and Jesus had temptations. I have temptations. We all have temptations to get our way, to manipulate others, to maybe cause a scene at times, and to make ourselves the centre of the world. And during Lent, we want to make Jesus our focus, because Jesus is the way of love and the way of peace. And so during Lent, we do three main things. We fast, so we give up some of those things that we really like, and we put them aside, so we have time and space to pray a bit more and to do acts of service, an act of charity. So in a moment, I'm going to sit down, and I want you to think of one thing you could do as an act of service in your home this evening. And that's for the young kids and also the big kids and the slightly older, more mature kids here in our church today. What can you do as an act of service when you go home this evening to bring something of the love of Jesus to your home? Let's be people of Jesus during this time and be them to the very best of our abilities. So I'm going to sit down, we'll have a few moments of silence, and then I'll get up and we'll move on with the Mass.